Good morning, AFO. I want to share a little scripture with you before we begin. I've been studying in Psalms this week, and these few verses I just want to share with you that says, "O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare your praise. For you will not delight in sacrifice, or I would give it. You will not be pleased with a burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise." So he asks us to come before him humbly, to lay our pride down, to be ready to grow, to change, to listen to him this morning, and that with a humble heart we will lift up his name and praise him. And we're going to start this morning. Grace is going to help lead us today. We're going to sing "In Christ Alone," because that's the only place we have hope. Would you stand and let's sing together, Christ Alone. The next song we're going to sing, I want to remind you, as Michael has been taking us through this new series, The Journey, and we're going to have a great privilege of hearing someone's journey this morning. Several years ago, Dan and I were asked to step out in faith to do some ministry. And I remember thinking, not me. I said, no way. And I felt God just pricking my spirit. Wait, just pray. Because I felt unqualified. This was no way. And God said, pause, pray, wait. And I realized that He was asking me to step out into something that I did feel unqualified for. He was asking me to go somewhere I'd not gone before. But isn't that who God is? It is not because of my qualifications. It is not because of who I am. And He reminded me it wasn't about my abilities or inabilities. It was about who God was. And if He wants to move me along this journey, He will give me everything I need. And so on this journey, as Michael has talked to us about, He is moving us spiritually, continually. Whether He's moving us from outside of the kingdom and calling us to have a personal relationship with Him, or He's calling us to take the next step of faith in our spiritual walk as we grow. Is He calling you to disciple somebody? Is He calling you to step out into waters you've not known before? And you feel, I'm not qualified. I don't have it. You're right. But our God does. And we're going to sing this song. One of my favorite characters or people in the Bible is Peter, because I feel like I can relate to him. He jumps into things and thinks about things sometimes later and opens his mouth and gets himself in trouble. But Peter was the one who jumped out in the water, and then he was overcome by fear. But then Christ took a hold of his hand, and Christ led him to safety. But this song is, the song is called Oceans, and we've sang it here a few times before, and Grace is going to lead us. It says, He's calling us into the unknown. He's calling us to take a step of faith. So this morning, as we hear about a journey, pause for a moment and think, where are you on that journey? Where is God challenging you? What's the next step that we need to take, that I need to take, that you need to take? And so as we sing this, and as we hear the service today, as we're going to hear a testimony of a person's journey and their walk with the Lord and the places that He has called her, pause this morning. What is God calling from you, from me? What's the next step that He has for you as we are on this journey toward Him? Let's sing together, Oceans. You're going to be able to read Peter's story in the scriptures in this song. We want to thank you that when we are overcome, we say your name. And as you did to Peter, you outstretch your hand and you take us in, surrounding us with your safety, your protection, your care. Oh God, we just praise you this morning for who you are, a rescuer of our souls, the one who makes our path straight. Doesn't mean that life is easy, as we're going to hear this morning. It is not always an easy road. But God, we have a God who never, ever lets go of our hand. If we will continue keeping our face towards you, we will not be overcome. We will not be overcome. Thank you this morning for who you are and who we are in you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, good morning, church. Good morning. Thank you, Carrie and Grace. Can we give the Lord through them a round of applause this morning for leading us? Thank you guys so much. So, we have been on this journey of seeking to learn what it means to be moved spiritually. And so we talked about how those steps begin by taking the first step of when we say yes to Jesus, when we surrender, when we ask him to be the Lord, the Master, the Savior of our life, which we call that the step of an outsider to a believer. The next step is where the believer now begins to learn what it means to follow Christ. What does it mean to be baptized? What does it mean to follow his commands? That then eventually leads to becoming a worker for the kingdom, to where there's an intentionality behind what we do every day, and that we're actively pursuing his plan for our lives, which then ultimately leads to being a world changer. Not only are we working for the kingdom, but we're like, how can we truly get this message of love, hope, and forgiveness to the ends of the earth? And so we've been walking through those stages over the last several weeks, and what we wanted to do this morning is we wanted to kind of give a real-life example of that. And so we have asked a good friend of mine and a partner in the ministry, Miss Bobby Falkenberry, is going to come up here in just a moment and join us. And before she does, I want to kind of just introduce Bobby. I know she's not a stranger to some of you, but then maybe to others you may not know Bobby. I've known Bobby for probably 10 years now. I used to be a youth and children's pastor on staff of a church, and when I was there on staff, she actually served on our children's leadership team. And so ever since then, we've always worked in the ministry together, and almost 5 years ago, when God led us to start All for One Ministries, the mission side of everything, she was an integral part of that. Now we started the church. She's helped with that a lot. I joke and tease, and I had to ask her permission. I said, can I tell the church that you actually didn't even want to vote for me when I was hired on at the staff of the church? It wasn't because of anything against me. She just kind of had a distaste for youth pastors for whatever reason. I don't know.
God, I didn't know you were going to say that.
But nonetheless, she listened to God. No, I'm just playing. But anyway, so we've become good friends over the last 10 years, and Bobby has a grace-filled story that she wants to come and share this morning. And our goal and our plan is that she shares her story, that it's not so much her story, even though it is, but it's also an opportunity for us to see ourselves in light of her story and to ask ourselves, where are we at on this spiritual journey? So, if you would you give a warm AFO welcome to Miss Bobby Falconberry.
Thank you. And he reminds me that I didn't vote for him many, many times. Many times.
All right, Bobby. So, we've got a lot to cover this morning, and thank you for being willing to open up and share. And one of our goals is that whenever we're on stage up here, we call it stage even though it's the rug, typically, is we aim for transparency. I mean, we don't want to be overly rehearsed. We want to be real, if you would. And so she's going to open up about some real issues and just some curveballs that life has thrown at her. And we're going to try to walk through the 4 major stages of her journey of what that has looked like for her. And so the first step of the journey, you got your bulletin there. You can follow along. We've got those steps outlined there for you. But the first step of the journey is becoming a believer. And so Bobby is going to tell us about, at 9 years of age, how she began her spiritual journey of following Christ. So Bobby, 9 years old, what kind of big sins were you committing in the big town of Flat Creek at 9 years of age? I mean, we just dying to hear this morning.
Well, one thing that came to my mind, one of the biggest things that I still have shame to this day that I did, and I've never told the people. This is the first time ever that I have admitted doing this to anybody.
Hey, y'all pull up your chairs closer.
To anybody. I'll try to change the names to protect the innocent, but there was a beauty shop that we went to when we were young. If you were in Flat Creek, you'll know what it is, but there was only one. And I don't know why, I was about 6 years old, and for some reason I saw a hair bow, and I wanted that hair bow. I haven't even told Carrie this. I wanted that hair bow so bad, and I took it. I did, Carrie. I took that hair bow, and when you're 6 years old, like looking back, I don't know how much time elapsed. I couldn't even wear it. I felt so guilty about taking that hair bow, and I had it. Mama had some bobby pins and stuff in the bathroom, and it would sit there, and every time I go in there, I'd look at it. It was just haunting me, that hair bow. And so finally, this is not the way I wasn't a Christian at the time, should do this. We should meet things head on. But I took the hair bow after weeks, months of guilt, and I went to the playground because the daughter was in a grade close to mine at school of the lady who owned the beauty shop. And I put it in her pocket, in her jacket pocket. I've not told her to this day that I did it. And this week, when I was thinking about this, I ran into her mom in the grocery store, and I almost, in the drink aisle, went ahead and confessed. I think I probably need to do that.
You just did.
Yeah, I guess I did. But I'm, God gives you that conscience. I knew, even though I wasn't a Christian, that was wrong. I knew it was that's probably, even to this day, one of the heaviest sins.
You're doing good, sister.
No. I guess it was just such an impression, because I didn't talk to anybody about it, and it was just, but, I've always worried about, I don't have that Saul to Paul Damascus experience because I got saved when I was young, and I'm like, I can't say, well, I did all these things and now I didn't, but I look back at that hair bow sin, and I'm telling you, that was big. That was big for a 6-year-old.
So tell us, 9 years old, still in hair bows. So how did you actually become a follower of Christ? How did that begin for you?
Well, Mama did take us to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. My daddy was not saved, but she took us to church. And I don't remember exactly what the preacher was saying, but I know it was about sin. And I remember feeling a heaviness and just, there's the church. I remember, that's a modern day picture. It looked a little different then, but I remember feeling a heaviness during that service. And we had an altar call where you go down to this old wooden altar. And I remember going down to the altar and I didn't pray what we would know the sinner's prayer, but I knew, I was, admitting to Christ that I needed Him and that I had a lot of sin in my life, even at that age.
Yeah, and so, that's a young age, but yet you still understood the concept that you needed forgiveness and Christ was the one to do that.
Yeah.
Did things begin to change?
I remember going to school the very next day. I couldn't to this day tell you what date it was, but I remember going to school the next day, and I remember where I was standing in the hallway, and I remember thinking things are going to be different now. I had no idea what that meant, but I just knew it was going to be different. I was probably 8 at the time. I got baptized when I was 9, but I just remember it was going to be different.
Okay, so you make a profession of faith. You're in church, going to church. What did the process of growing look like as a follower of Christ now that you've surrendered to Him?
Not long after I became a Christian, it came time for I think it was maybe a yearly baptism, because we didn't have a baptismal pool in this church.
We don't either.
No, we don't, do we? I go in the bathroom and sprinkle it. But I got baptized in a creek when it came up. And this is the creek. This is a modern day picture.
Modern day.
Yeah, I went and took it this week, and it was a little bit different. But that was the creek. I remember getting baptized. I think Carrie got baptized at the same time. Carrie's my sister, by the way. But I remember getting baptized. I don't remember a lot. The only thing I do remember is we went to my papa's house because he lives close to it, and he fished in there because we'd have he said, I better not catch a fish that swallowed your sins. I remember that specifically. And, I was so young, I was like, I was thinking about that. Is that going to happen? So there might be some big fish in there.
Like, I got all kind of jokes running through my mind, but I'm just going to stay away from that.
There's some big fish in that creek.
You got me all sidetracked.
I'm sorry. But, and Mom took us faithfully to church. Not to put the church down, I don't remember having a lot of discipleship. I mean, we had Sunday school and things like that, but really didn't have a lot of strong discipleship at home. My daddy was an alcoholic, and it was escalating in chaos at my house. I mean, we couldn't even bring kids home to spend the night. And he doesn't mind me telling that. But it was chaos. So my mama was doing all she could just to pay the bills, to go to work, to keep things from being insane. I mean, he gambled. He would go off when he would start drinking, and it was chaos. I had the King James Bible, no internet, and no commentary. I did the best I could on my discipleship on my own. I really did, and probably a little bit legalistic with it. I remember thinking I got to read 3 chapters a day. So I read Psalms 117 a bunch. That's the shortest chapter.
one.
I try to branch out, but it's like it's hard when you have no commentary and no internet.
And King James.
And King James at 9, 10. I mean, that was tough.
Yeah.
I did the best I could.
That shall read more.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That was tough. But I tried, and I do remember, and I don't remember the turn, but I remember obviously being aware of that my daddy was lost. And I remember having evangelistic prayers. Now looking back, I'm thinking, that was pretty, I'm glad that I felt drawn to pray for him. And that was probably one of my biggest prayers, is praying for him, praying for him, praying for him. And one other specific prayer that I remember is we were going to Maggie Valley on vacation in the mountains. And I don't know why at the time, but I kept praying for us to be safe. I was 9 years old. And I just remember praying that over and over, repetitively. And we went, one day Daddy got home, or Mama got home from work. We went a little bit early. He had bought a brand new truck. It had maybe 1,000 miles, put a new camper on it. And we were going on vacation to Maggie Valley. Me and Carrie prepared all summer what we were going to do. But I remember just praying. And on the way, it was about midnight. I was in the back, the camper shell. We were in the back. Daddy had fixed us up something. I begged, please let me sit in the front. Let me sit in the front. Carrie's going to sleep. She won't talk to me. And I had been looking out, like where the thing goes up, and I'm looking out at the cars. It's almost midnight. So we stop at a rest stop, and he finally relents and lets me sit in the front with him and Mama. So it's Daddy, and then Mama, then me on the end. And of course, I get up there, and I started drifting off to sleep. and I heard Daddy say, he's going to hit us. And I looked up, and I could see a car. It was on 4 lanes in Hendersonville. I could see a car spinning like that. But it was a drunk driver, and he came like that in basically a head-on collision, but from the back. And I remember after that happened, and there's the truck right there. I remember after that happened thinking, why didn't God answer my prayer? I mean, I really didn't understand. I was like, why did I pray for safety and we had this wreck? We didn't get to go on vacation. Now, Daddy still has problems with his knee from that wreck. We all had different injuries. Carrie had a concussion. But we checked out of the hospital that night. And as moving along in discipleship and learning more about God and putting things in practice later on, I realized, one, that I think he did prompt me to pray. And I think it took me years to realize he did keep us safe. We didn't wear seat belts. We didn't have seat belts back then. And had I not begged him to get in the front seat, I'm pretty sure I would have got killed because I was standing at the back of the truck. And it took me years of growing and learning that prayers aren't always answered exactly like I think they're going to be. But it also reminded me to listen when you feel God telling you to pray for somebody or talk to somebody. But Michael, the discipleship part, I learned the most in September of 1983 when my daddy got saved. And he was, you ask anybody in Kershaw, he was the worst of the worst as far as drinking. And it was a total change. I mean, he went into AA, which they teach a higher power, but Daddy, he had that background where he knew it was one higher power, and that was Jesus Christ. And he was sending us letters. We didn't see him for a couple of weeks saying, I'm praying for y'all, I'm reading your Bible. We were like, do what? So that was one of the biggest prayers I ever saw answered. And I'm telling you, he didn't sit down with us and say, oh, we're going to do this Bible study. But his life, he brought us in on things, oh, they want me to do this, but I can't. God would not be pleased with that. I can't do it that way. I got to do it the honest way. I learned more from his life as far as discipleship than anything, I think, growing up.
And how long has that been? 35 years?
Yes, 35 years this September.
And your daddy still loves Jesus?
Yeah, he reads he's got one chapter I know he reads every day, but the same chapter, Psalms 91. He reads that every day, but he reads the Bible. He'll tell us, I just finished reading up the Bible. Yeah. I mean, he was a voracious reader. He would definitely, he gave everything he could to being lost and to drinking. And then he gave it, when he made that turn, he gave everything he could that way. It was all or nothing.
That's a good parallel.
Yeah.
So you're learning how to pray. You're watching your dad's life, and then he kind of begins to live it, which is another form of a hands-on discipleship with you and Carrie and the family and everything. So how old are you at this stage?
I was about to turn 13 when he got saved. I was fixing to turn 13.
Okay, so teenage years. And this is about where you actually start learning to work for Christ.
Yeah.
What's that look like for you?
Daddy told us we had to clean up the church. And it was not a paid position.
Can we get him on speakerphone right now?
Yeah, can I call a friend, phone a friend? But he did. But I do remember, and sometimes I'd be aggravated because it'd be Saturday morning and he'd go clean up the church, a short turn, we would take turns. And but I remember being in there and thinking, I could just do it sloppy, and maybe it's a little bit of legalism on my part, I don't know, but I was like, God sees me, I'm cleaning this up right. I'm not cutting corners. I tried to do it right. I tried to hit every pew with a vacuum cleaner.
Hey, let me ask you this, Bobby, because you've referred to it a couple times that I've heard, and maybe some of us listening have caught on. So you've used the term legalistic and legalism. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that is, and kind of how you're implying?
I think sin was preached about a lot when I was growing up.
That's a good thing.
I know, but I know it is, but I think I had the mindset of earning my salvation, of doing good works and doing good things, and that I had a view of God as sitting up here and he's going to throw a lightning bolt on me if I didn't do everything exactly. I mean, it's taken me years. That would be a legalistic view. I've got to read these 3 chapters or I'm not a good girl, as you say. I've got to do these things. and it should come more from my love from Him wants me to do the good things, not do the good things so I get love from Him.
Did y'all catch that?
Yep.
That's noteworthy material right there. Yeah. So you begin to learn eventually at some point that working for Him is not an expression of trying to earn His favor, but it's an outward expression because you have His favor.
Right.
That you do.
Right.
Okay, so you're working in the church, you're cleaning the church on Saturday mornings. What else does that look like as you learning what it means to become a worker for Christ?
Well, I did Sunday school class. I taught that. I was like 17. Probably somebody asked me and I just said yes. I probably didn't think about it.
Right.
And then you go through college, kind of sporadic in college because I went away to school. I never found a church there. But as my husband and I got married, a guy I dated, Chad Falconberry, in high school, and we got married, and he had a church, and I had a church.
So, all right, so we college, graduate, like you get married during college or after college? How did that work?
I graduated in 92, I got married a year later.
Okay.
In 93. So we got married in 1993, and it took us about a year and a half, or 2 years, about till 95, that we maybe a year before we started visiting a lot of churches. And we were kind of slight to begin with. So we got into a church, and we joined the church, I think, in 95, and then it was like immediately, can you do this? Can you do that? Because we were faithful to come, and we said yes to a few things, and it increased.
Right.
Until I was like, from everything from bereavement committee to a family life center committee. I mean, everything in between. It was busy.
Right. I want to stop right there. I want to back up, and we don't have this in our notes, and we haven't talked about this. But I know at some point I've heard you say this, and this may be helpful for us here this morning and those that will be listening online. So, how long were you and Chad actually married?
18 and a half years.
18 and a half years. And I know I've heard you say early on in y'all's marriage, like there was a critical point there.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk about that a little bit and what that looked like and how you guys kind of got over that? And I know we're talking about what it means to work for Christ, but I just feel like I feel like we have a lot of couples here. I feel like there are people that are watching. 18 years is a long time to be married,
Yeah.
So y'all had to end up doing something right. But kind of off the record, would you speak to that just a little bit?
So you mean?
Like specifically, I remember you sharing with me that like y'all had a
Like conflict with us?
Yeah, like y'all didn't know if y'all was gonna make it, did you?
Yeah,
like you sent him to his mama's house or something.
No,
Oh.
no. Okay, yeah, this was not in the notes, but okay. We were married in May. You got me stuttering. We were married in May. In September that year, I found out I was pregnant. I worked at a doctor's office. So I found out pretty quick, and so in January of '94, I was 5 months pregnant, and we found out we were losing the baby. And that was obviously early in our marriage. We weren't even on our first anniversary yet, and that was one of the hardest things I probably ever gone through, was seeing, I'm just gonna say it, a little casket go in the ground. That was very, very difficult. And for a young, very young marriage, and it was, people would call and they would ask about me. And they would kind of talk to Chad and say, well, how's Bobby doing? And they kind of skipped over him. And he even has some written testimony that I have where he talked about that, how they would kind of skip over him. And he wasn't begrudging that, but he had a hard time. I mean, it was hard. But we did kind of drift apart. He left for about 2 weeks, and it was tough. And I can't. It was just a choice that we made. And I remember something clicked in me. Things have got to be different. And it was just, and he started, and with him too, just by his written testimony, he realized that was like the center of the problem, is dealing with that or not dealing with it. And we made a conscious effort to get in church and start working, and we were able to move past that.
Yeah,
it was a choice.
And that's a mouthful right there.
It is.
Now that's coming from a 36-year-old single guy, but I think it's safe to say that we understand that any healthy relationship is always a choice. It's a choice that both parties are going to commit to see the end goal accomplished. So I want to take that, I want to catapult. So it was kind of after that happened that y'all really kind of began to get settled into a church.
Right.
And you began working.
Yeah.
And you touched on it. You just didn't begin working, like you really become like super involved.
Yeah, Chad was, he would come some, but he hadn't finished his college degree, so he was working at Walmart Distribution Center on the weekends so that he could go to school during the week and finish his degree to teach. So I was there, and with him on the weekends, I would get involved in a lot of stuff. And then when he got his degree, started teaching, and he was able to come to church, and we were just, probably me more so than him was just busy. I wouldn't hardly say no if somebody asked me to do something.
Right. Because he would actually go on to become a deacon.
He was a deacon, and he got more involved. Yeah.
So at what point did Luke and Jake come along?
Luke was born in 2001, June 15th, and it was really neat. I remember praying. My due date was like July 5th, and I remember praying, as long as he's going to be healthy, please let him be born close or on Father's Day, because it was 8 years between where we lost our daughter to that time, and I just remember, I don't know, I just wanted to be, and sure enough, he came 3 weeks early. And he was born June 15th, and that Sunday morning we had our first Father's Day in the hospital, and his grandma brought him his first Father's Day card, and it was really neat.
Yeah.
And then a few years later we had Jake, and in 2004 he was early as well. I didn't pray for him to be early; he just came early.
Yeah.
So yep.
All right. So now you got your family, you got the kids. You got the marriage going on, you're working, you're involved in the church actively. What happened next?
Well, on November the 8th, or November the 7th, really, 2011, I had been working we had a bazaar at the church where we were raising money for the Family Life Center. I had been real busy doing that. And that Monday, Chad football had ended that Friday night. He was a football coach too. And then that Monday morning, he had taken Luke. We got home from school, work. He had taken Luke to practice because he was on the little All-Stars football team. And at 10 o'clock, the boys went to bed about 10 o'clock. Just all of a sudden, Chad collapsed, and within 2 hours, he had died suddenly with no warning at all. So basically, the boys, when they went to bed, I got my parents to come over while I realized things were, escalating, and my mom just kind of watched the doors to make sure they didn't get up, and basically they went to bed that night, everything was fine, and in the morning, everything had happened, I was back home, and I had to tell them that Chad had died.
And this was 2011?
Yep, 2011.
What changed?
Everything changed. When somebody dies, especially suddenly, you immediately, or I did, you start to prioritize things. You don't even do it. It just, priority jumps on you. It's like, what am I doing? Yeah. I was so busy, and even that week, I'm like, I was so busy doing all these things. I need to reorganize that. Why am I doing all these things? Yeah. And it really made me examine why I did the things that I did. Yeah. And it was just a little bit of survival. Now I will tell you, this one thing, out of all the people that came to my house, he was a teacher, so I'd look around and there was teachers in the middle of the day, and he was a coach, so he was very well loved. He really was, and he was the chairman of deacons of the church at that time, and there were so many people in our house. But I remember, out of all the chaos of people coming in the house, I remember walking to the door of my son's room and just feeling like I could feel God comforting me. More than anybody else that came through, I could feel him. And that was kind of a key. It was hard. It was still hard, but I knew I was going to be all right.
Yeah, so that's been almost 7 or 8 years. How have you coped with that? And then even with the boys and learning to do life different.
I made a decision that I would not focus on his death as his life. Meaning, every time I talk about him or think about him, it wasn't going to be consumed by his death. So I made a decision that I would not be fearful of saying his name, telling stories about him, And I'd say to the boys, you remember when your daddy did this? You remember when he did that? You know how I would not put it in a box because I don't feel like Chad would not want me to do that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't let that define his life.
Yeah, that's a good word. That's a good word. I don't know what it means when you get chills, but I just had chills.
But you know him. He was laughing, and I'm like, he would not.
Chad and I actually, I think I was the chaplain of the football team at the time, and then Chad was the chairman of the deacons at the church where I was serving at, and Chad and I have begun to become good friends, and I remember it was sudden, it was drastic, it was a game changer, life changer. Yeah. So you were in the process of dealing with all of that, and you said something. You said when the death happened, you were kind of forced to reprioritize and kind of look at what the priorities for your life were. And so you were busy working.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what the priority shift began to look like, and then how you began to make that next step of not just working for the kingdom, but actually becoming a world changer, which just simply is someone that begins to look for ways with intentionality to leverage all of their life of getting the gospel?
I think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I think that happening set the stage for the next step. And the next step was you were planning a mission trip to Ecuador. And Luke, my oldest, who was not in the youth yet, he was 10. My boys were 10 and 7 when Chad died. He said, I want to go on that mission trip. And I'm sure he probably did not have maybe the best intention, but whatever reason, he wanted to go. And so I started thinking about it, and then I already was thinking about prioritizing, thinking, why am I doing things? And I'm like, how can I tell him no? But he wasn't young, he wasn't old enough to go without a parent. And so that meant my 7-year-old, Jake, would have to stay at home. So I would be going somewhere else, another country for the first time, and leaving Jake at home. And then I started thinking, well, what if and I think I talked to Michael about this, what if I get somebody to be responsible for Luke in Ecuador and I stay home with Jake? I went back and forth, and I know I drove him crazy. And I still do, but I know I drove him crazy because I was like, what about this? And I know he was thinking, Bobby, you got to trust God, but he didn't really say that. I had to come to that, and it really just hit me. I either believe God is sovereign or I don't. I either believe my days are numbered and their days are numbered and I can't control it, or I don't. And so I decided to go on the mission trip with Luke, and Jake stayed with my sister and Danny. And the picture up here is the commissioning service. Now, Michael didn't tell us. He took us there, and he would do like
it was a surprise. They didn't know where they were going.
We didn't know where we were going, and it was a service to commission us before we went on the trip. And I don't remember. I mean, I finally realized as we got there, as we were getting closer, because we didn't know where we were going, we had to get in the van and just go. And when we started coming closer, this is actually where I got baptized. This is it was like it came full circle.
I didn't even know that
this
week, matter of fact.
Yeah. And so when we got there, I was like, man, this is the creek I got baptized in at 9. And here I was going on my first mission trip with my son all those 32 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you and Luke went the first year?
Yes.
And Jake stayed behind that year?
Jake stayed behind.
And then second year, did all of you go?
We went to Fort Pierce, Florida.
That's right.
The next year.
Yeah.
And then the next year, there was a trip planned to Nicaragua.
That's right.
And that was 2014, and we were going to go on that trip.
So all of you were scheduled to go to Nicaragua,
Yep.
And it was like a month and a half before the trip?
Yeah, it was March 20th, 2014. I was getting ready. Jake had went to play with the schoolmate. He was 9 at the time. He went to play with a man picked him up, and they were going to play at the house. And I was getting ready for Luke's baseball game. Maybe an hour and a half later, the man came back and he said Jake had gotten hurt. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. We couldn't figure out what had happened. I mean, some bricks fell on him. They were playing at this old cinder block building, and some bricks fell on him, cinder block bricks. And he didn't have a lot of scratches on him, but he would not walk. And so he picked him up and put him in his room, and he left, and I'm trying to assess what's going on. And I said, well, Jake, I just need to see you put some weight on your leg. And so I thought he had hurt his knee. And so I picked him up, laid him down. He couldn't do it. Make a long story short, called the ambulance, took him to Lancaster, and from there, a few hours later, we found out he had broken his back and six vertebrae he had broken. And he was
paralyzed.
He was paralyzed. Yeah, he bruised his spinal cord, and he could not move his legs at all. And I didn't realize that, like, it was unfolding. He had a lot of pain in his legs where nerves were firing off, and he could not move his legs. And so immediately went to Charlotte, had emergency surgery, and it was actually 9 long days before he could barely move his legs, a little bit. And the doctor told us in the ER, he said, I can fix the hardware, he said, but I have no idea on the spinal cord. He said it could be months, years, and I can't promise he'll ever walk.
So that was right before Nicaragua.
It was. And so I had to make a decision about, again, it was close, and I had to make a decision about, did me and Luke still go? Did I bring Jake? I ended up making a decision not to take Jake because I was worried about all the travel. He had not been on the trip, so he couldn't tell me. But it reiterated in my mind, going back to that trip there in Ecuador when Jake broke his back. To me, I remember thinking, Jake was a few blocks from my house, and I couldn't control that he broke his back. So it cemented to me I made the right decision going to Ecuador without him, because it just showed I can't control things. I can't control those things. God is sovereign, and He'll take care of him. So I felt okay with leaving. I didn't struggle as much leaving Jake behind.
Let me ask you this, Bobby. So we've done a lot of mission trips. We've gone, and when I say we, mean the ministry when we was on staff at a church, and we've had a lot of families go, and a lot of times that's a big question for families. Mm-hmm. It's like, is dad just going to go, or maybe it's just mom, or it's just the kids, or we're going to go together, and sometimes it can be a struggle of deciding, and so you kind of done it both ways.
Yeah.
You've taken them, you've left them behind, mm-hmm. even after Chaz's death. Do you have any insight or encouragement to? You've already alluded to God's sovereignty, mm-hmm. but with that being, maybe a challenge for the family dynamic, have you ever had any regrets about any of the decisions that you made in regards to following God, what you felt to be God's will?
No, because even I went to Zambia this year, and neither one of them went because they were in school, and it was hard, but I don't regret it because, they could see me going on a girls' weekend. Right. But I don't regret it at all because I think they've learned from seeing me do that. They've learned from going, and I don't regret it at all. I've never regretted.
How many countries have you been to?
Oh, God. Nicaragua, Ecuador, Zambia. But I've been to Ecuador 3 times.
Yeah.
Nicaragua and Zambia.
How many mission trips have you been on? Roughly
7 or 8, because Charleston, went there, right. Maybe 9.
So like in the last 10 years, basically.
Yeah,
8
at
years.
least 1, maybe 2 a year.
I got you.
Smaller one.
So
yeah.
Would you consider yourself a world changer?
I put in my notes that I do not consider myself a world changer, but an agent of such.
What do you mean by that?
Because I can't really change anybody, and I've learned that in Charleston when I tried to witness to that man. And everybody was watching me, and
I think I was videoing.
Yes, and I mean, I don't think I have the gift of evangelism, but I didn't let that stop me from going. But I mean, he was asking me all these questions. Everybody's watching me, and the boss is watching me, and I'm like, I'm not answering these questions good. But I did learn that you throw the seeds out, and let the Holy Spirit do the work. You prepare.
Right.
You don't just not prepare, but you try to prepare and be as knowledgeable as you can and try to be natural and open. Right. And I found it's most effective when you don't try to force it and you try to just talk about how God's worked in your life.
Right. So you don't really put the label on, hey, I'm a world changer. You just look at yourself, I'm just God's hands and feet.
Yeah.
I'm just His agent.
And He's going to change it if it's going to be
tries to follow Him in obedience every day.
Right.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So if there's one thing that you've learned, and I know that you've prepared to speak on this, about the busy side of things, mm-hmm. and because we can get caught up in doing the good, but good become the enemy of best.
Right.
And I know just from your testimony and talking with you, that kind of was a shift in your mindset. Could you speak a little bit about briefly about how that changed for you?
I think
Because you were so actively involved in the church.
Yeah, I think when you all of a sudden lose that that other parent,
Yeah.
and you're just doing it, you have to prioritize, and it made me more. It made me sift things and look at the eternal value. Sometimes I felt like I was just doing that to be doing it. Do we even really need to do that? I mean, do we need to have poinsettias and I'm doing all this work? I mean, it's not that all those things are bad, but a lot of times I would just step in because nobody else was doing it. And I think finding out what my spiritual gifts and talents were and trying to gear more toward those things. And I could see that's where God was leading me being selective. And a lot of it was I didn't want to tell somebody no. I didn't want to say, no, I won't do it. That's pride. That's pride, saying I can do it all, I think. For me it was. And, we can say, well, I just wanted to help, but it made me look good that I could do all these things. But I'm so busy doing all those things, I didn't have time to do what over here God may have been really wanting me to do. That may have had more eternal value than this thing.
Right. That's actually one of our values here at AFO is that as a church, we don't have Sunday night services, we don't have Wednesday night services, we don't have Sunday school, and eventually we're going to incorporate some things like small groups, and we believe that there are certain things that have to happen, but we believe at the end of the day, I know this is how this is going to sound, hearing it for the first time for some of you, we can almost church people to death. Mm-hmm. And let me just give you a real quick example, and then Bobby has a song that she's going to sing for us that is kind of a part of her testimony. But what I just simply mean by that is, like for example, if we come this morning, we have Sunday school and we're learning about Jesus feeding the 5,000, and then we go to preaching and we hear about, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Well, then we come back Sunday night and we hear about, well, now Jesus is dying on the cross. And then we come back Wednesday night and we're here. It's like, over the course of 1 week, we've heard so many different things. It's like, how can we take it all in? And then if you throw in, well, the church wants me to volunteer to do this. Well, Susie's got a ball game tonight. I got to be at her ball game. And we look, and it's like we have almost programmed ourselves to just be so busy, even doing church. And one of our values here at AFO is we don't want to church people to death. We want our time together to be well spent. We want to be edified. We want to be built up. But then we want to be sent out. We want to be sent out that wherever we go to our spheres of influence, that God is using us to impact the world, that we don't always just have to have a meeting in order to accomplish that. I think that's kind of what you're saying, Bobby.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Is that you learn to step back a little bit and to say what is most important here.
I'll give you one little example. This is when Chad was living. I remember being on a lot of cooking committees and had this big beautiful cake up there that I was going to take, and Chad was like, I want a piece. And I was like, no, this is for the church. And it hit me. I'm like, I can't believe I won't cut him one slice. And I started cutting him a slice out every time before I take it.
You got a cake this morning?
No, I don't have one this morning. But I mean, it was like, it was a little symbolic of, I can't step on people just to do all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, I want to thank you for sharing your story this morning, and I know that you're going to sing a song, and you probably have some comments just to kind of what this song means to you. So I'm going to kind of just step off and let you sing that for us, and we'll come back with the closing.
Okay.
In just a few minutes.
The name of the song, and it's just pictures throughout my life and different things that have happened. It's called "Healing Is in Your Hands." And when we think healing, a lot of times we think is a physical thing, and sometimes it is. But I do remember in the hospital before Jake could move his legs again. What if he never walks? Is God still good enough to me? And the answer was yes. So this is from a spiritual perspective. Look at it in your life and look at these things on here. And I encourage you to write down where you're at in your journey and see about moving to the next step. But also, everybody doesn't know this. Everybody does not have a privilege to hear what you're hearing. And I remember my daddy, as he would see preachers on the TV that would go and heal people. That was, I'm not saying healing is not still going on today, but we know the preachers we're talking about that would be on TV. Daddy said if he had the power of healing, he said, I'd never sleep. I'd go to every children's hospital in the world until they were all healed. That's not what a sovereign God would do necessarily, but that's what my daddy would do. But we have the greatest message in the world. Why would we sit on that and not tell anybody. Our co-workers, just in our daily lives, weave it into our daily lives and share with them. But I hope you will listen to the words of this song and reflect on that.
No mountain, no valley, no gain or loss we know can keep us from your love. No sickness, no secret, no chain is strong enough to keep us from your love, to keep us from your love. No matter where I am, healing is in your hands. Our present, our future, our past is in your hands. We're covered by your blood. Covered by your
Man, she's got me messed up this morning. I seen that for the first time about a day ago, and you know, Chad was a good friend of mine, and then just watching everything. But at the end of the day, you know, it was a tragedy, and a lot of things have happened. But I like what she said, that she chose not to focus on the negative side, because even through that, God gets glory. He brings good out of ashes. And thank you, Bobby, for being willing to share. I know that myself, like others, have benefited and been blessed by it. We're going to go into a time where we're going to take up our offering today. John is actually on vacation today. John, if you're watching, man, we want to say, hola, como estás? Muy bien. Hope you're doing good, brother.
Gonna do his job.
Catch some rays for us while you're down there. But we're going to take up our offering here in just a few minutes as you prepare to, as an act of worship, give back to what God has given to you. I want to make just a few announcements. One is, thank you guys for those of you that have brought some flood buckets today. For those of you that might not have known or maybe not aware, so we've got a mission trip planned next week. We leave Tuesday for North Carolina. We've had it on the books for about 6 months now. Well, last week, North Carolina, the parts around the Hendersonville area went into a state of emergency because of all the flooding. So that drastically changed all of the work that we were going to be doing there. We've changed the location where we're going to be staying. We've changed the ministry, what we're going to be doing, because we're going to be actually going into the neighborhoods, into the homes where the floods have happened. And we were told they have 51 homes that they're going to try to bring back to normalcy. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to take 51 flood buckets. Now, flood bucket may be the first time you ever heard of that. Basically what a flood bucket is a 5-gallon bucket that's filled with cleaning supplies and a whole host of other things that will be given to the homeowner, to that home, that can begin helping clean up just a little bit. And so we've asked, I think including our church, 5 churches altogether, to donate 10 buckets. That would be 50, and I think we just said, well, hey, we'll do 11, and that'll make 51. If you on Facebook, you see the announcement, we asked for 15 from the Facebook world, because usually it's hard to get flood buckets. I mean, it just is for different reasons, and so we said, well, if we can get 15 from Facebook, that'll help cover the spread if we got any other shortage. So thank you guys that brought them. If you didn't know about it and you'd like to contribute, Angie, who is here with us, she has volunteered that tomorrow people have been given monetary donations, and so we're going to take that money and we'll go buy the supplies, we'll fill the buckets up, and then we'll take them with us. We estimate a bucket costs about $50, just depending on where you shop and if they got anything on sale or not. And so I think that we are, from what people have told me from the monetary gifts, we are at about 7 buckets here at AFO. And so if you were to feel led to give, you can give the money to Miss Kristen. If you'll give it to her, she'll get it to Angie, and then we'll go put those buckets together tomorrow. And then tomorrow, I think there's actually some churches that they were just going to do love offerings and take the money, and then we go by. And then I had another pastor, he contacted me and said they were doing 10 buckets. And so we're going to see, we'll know tomorrow kind of where we at. But if we don't reach 51, it'll be okay, because every little bit helps, you know. And we can't do everything, but we can do a little bit. And so that's kind of the way we're approaching that. Also, I want to just thank AFO Church. As you give this morning, 15% of everything that comes in from our budget through our giving, it goes out to bless other people. We call that missions. And one of the big ways that AFO is using the contributions that come in is we're helping plant another church in Asia, in Nepal, Asia. A pastor and his team that is doing something very much similar to like what we are. And so I just want to thank you for those that help AFO accomplish everything that it does for God's glory. You'll be hearing more about the church, and we'll keep you updated on that kind of thing. And so I just want to kind of make those 2 announcements. And so during the offering, Miss Grace is going to come back up, and she's going to sing a closing song for us as the offering is being collected, and then I'll come up with a final word. Grace?